2, 3. This is my show. I ain't got no music. Yeah. Copyright.
It's something how the theme is so effective after all these decades. It no matter I had things to do today. I ran errands, but just hearing the beginning of the theme makes you ready to watch an episode.
But like every one of the superstates that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace.
Goodness.
This is Mr. Romney Wood.
Man, did I pick an episode for today.
He's a citizen of the state, but will soon have to be eliminated. Because he is built out of flesh, and because he has a mind. Mr. Romney Wood.
Out of flesh and has a mind. Everybody's a robot? Man, he said logic and truth are an issue.
Wordsworth, Romney, field investigation finding obsolescence.
The Stark set has a lot to say.
Yes, sir, I know why I'm here.
You've been under investigation, Mr. Wordsworth, for the mandatory period of 1 year and 11 months. You're found to be obsolete.
You people, you make reference to the state?
I make reference to the state.
And you persist in declaring your occupation as being that...
Since there are no more books, Mr. Wordsworth, there are no more libraries.
Okay, so this is about, the subtext of this episode is about...
That would make the function of a minister somewhat academic as well.
There is a God.
Wow. Classic TV, they talked about what they wanted to talk about.
No gods. The state has proven that there is no gods.
A crawling insect, an ugly, misformed little creature who has no...
I gotta take notes. Hold on. I gotta pause this. Sorry. I'll fix this in the edit. Hold on.
You're a dealer in books and 2-cent fines and pamphlets and closed stacks and the mustard.
Remains with printer's ink, the narcotics that you call literature, the Bible...
Another call out to the Bible.
Find all of it an opiate to make you think you have a...
The Bible is a drug, an opiate.
And the state has no use for your kind.
Wow.
Romney Wordsworth, step forward.
The board finds you obsolete.
You are to be liquidated within a period of 48 hours, but you have an option as to method and precise time.
That I choose the following. To be given an assassin to whom I shall tell the method of my execution.
This is unheard of. Mr. Wordsworth, we don't understand the nature of the request.
I know I'm not saying much. Wordsworth is clearly up to something. Old WW. Look at this angle right here. Simple set says everything they want the set to say.
So how this obsolete...
Collar decoration. Collar decoration is very SS-like.
How do I know I wasn't invited here for that last pitiful gesture of vengeance on the part of the condemned?
Vengeance?
Yes. I'm some...
It's good dialogue exploring that was a possibility. I mean, I didn't think it was going to be that way, but the character has to think that he might have tried something. So he wants to argue with him about the system again after his trial.
I'll tell you the reason, though you won't admit it to yourself.
He still wants to be right.
Somewhere along the line, there's been a deviation from the norm. Your state has everything categorized, indexed, tagged. You are the strength. People like me are the weakness. It's remote control. Very efficient.
None of that stuff existed back then. Very much like Star Trek that way.
Executions, Mr. Wordsworth. Last year in the mass executions, we televised around the clock. 1,300 people were put to death in less than
We had predecessors, Mr. Wordsworth, who had the beginnings of the right idea.
Yes, Hitler.
Hitler, of course.
Stalin.
Stalin, too. But their
So,
era was
on
not
the
one of
nose.
excess. It was
core of resistance. Old people, for example, clutch at the past and won't accept the new.
Old people
They fasten onto the healthy body and damage it. So we
clutching onto the past.
and people like yourself. They can perform no useful function for the state, so we put an end to them.
That's the centerpiece of the whole thing. Old people clutching onto the past, and I'm going to have something to say about that.
That's right.
How in the world is this going to end?
What kind of idiocy is this, Mr. Wordsworth? You've locked the door.
Oh, yes, yes, I've locked the door. Now, question.
I'm going to sit down and read my Bible. It's been hidden here for over 20 years. It's a crime punishable by death. But still, it's the only possession that I have that has any value.
This is the fourth religious reference made in the episode, and the second one that talks about the Bible specifically. Possibly the third one.
I ask clarification of the term they. Ah, you mean the state? Oh, I think they'll sit on their hands for a while.
That's the second time he threw his dialogue back in his face.
Why don't you just sit down? We'll have a little chat.
Every single line of this is something that I want to talk about.
As death is a great equalizer. Thy rod and thy staff, they come.
The direction of this episode is super modern. Most of the time, classic TV and movies are basically, well, like the word says, screenplays. They're just plays for the screen, you know. Think William Shatner and how they make fun of how he played Captain Kirk because it's like he's on stage. This is super modern. This is film instead of stage. Look at this. You see that? Man, he was not lying about that midnight. Man. What is the denouement going to be for this episode? What are they going to say at the end of this episode?
You are obsolete.
But I'm not. I'm not obsolete. Please, I'm not obsolete.
The Chancellor, the late Chancellor, was only partly correct. He was obsolete. But so is the state, the entity he worshipped. Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete. A case to be filed under M for Mankind in the Twilight Zone.
Okay, man, I had to collect my thoughts. I actually finished the recording. I just did the edit. Hopefully I edited enough of the sound where this isn't copyright stricken or whatever. But let me just go through these notes. Here we go. Here's the review. What a great episode. All right, I put down "You Are a Bug." Okay, so this is during the initial trial, the first act of the piece, where they're arguing back and forth. Right around the time, if I remember this correctly, Burgess Meredith's character, Mr. Wordsworth, is defending the existence of God. The commissioner, or I can't remember his title, the guy that's in charge, the other character, he starts to attack him personally. I have noticed that whenever two people are engaging in discourse where they're debating, they're going point counterpoint. Let me tell you something. If you've never thought about it before, I have found that the first person to talk about the other person personally is the loser, right? Because you're going PlayStation, Xbox, and then the one person goes, your mama, and that's it. You lost. Whether you think so or not, you lost. Okay. The direction of the episode. I said it during the reaction. But the angles at which some of these shots were shot, especially the high angles when they show people walk through doors, especially those main doors in the court hall. Pretty modern, but I'll just leave that as that. Okay, you know what? I forgot to talk about the main issue. So this whole episode is essentially, I'm gonna say that the episode, well, the episode is aged great. The sentiment of the episode is very odd and ironic in the actual sense of the word irony, not the way kids use that word now, where they just mean hypocrisy. Kids, look up hypocrisy and look up irony. They are two different things. This episode is ironic. It's historically ironic because essentially you have, I don't know what year this episode came out. I didn't look it up before I started checking this out. But essentially the way I see this episode is someone sat down, it might have been Serling himself, and wrote down a scary existence where someone who thinks like the author, I'm not going to label it, someone who thinks like the author is like, wouldn't it be horrible to live in a future where there's all these advancements, but they don't accept the free spread of information, and they don't even accept that God exists. And everyone that thinks that there should be free information passed and believes in the existence of God are obsolete. And that word was chosen, it's in the title, that word was chosen very specifically, that the machinations of what's called progress, when society is progressing forward, everyone that doesn't want to go on, like they even call out old people specifically. I said it in the review. Old people who are holding on to the past are obsolete. God, obsolete. The Bible is referenced 3 or 4 times before. I keep wanting to call him Mr. Dingle because of the other Twilight episode. Wordsworth even starts reading from the Bible. Obsolete. Okay, so I thought the future was interesting. Okay, so you had the big halls. It was dark. They call, well, for us it's calling back to World War II, but for them, with the uniforms, very 1984. Here's one for you that our modern eyes might not pick up on. All the female judges, right? Female judges, right? We know Sandra Day O'Connor for the U.S. Supreme Court didn't come until the 80s, right? It was the 80s, right? The 80s, but they had women sitting in judgment of people on death panels in this episode. Very interesting. Okay, the language liquidated, right, to mean that you're going to be executed, liquidated, using euphemisms for the horror. Okay, I think we know where we get that. They televised executions, part of their future. Okay, and what I think is interesting about this concept of this 1984 like world is, I'm going to put it this way, viewer. The type of person who feared this very 1984 totalitarian future, right? There are still some people who talk like that and fear that, but it's changed. Instead of fearing 1984 where freedoms are curtailed and people can't do and say what they want, that same type of person now complains that there's too much freedom, it's unearned, people don't respect it, and they take certain securities for granted, and they seek pleasure and only pleasure and never grow up, which is more like Brave New World. So it's like there's a constant fear of the world of society going off kilter. It used to be our freedoms will be taken away. Now there's too much freedom and we have to rein it in. And notice that I didn't use any labels there, but I think you see where I'm going with that. Okay. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Here's the thing. The ending, right? How many times, again, going back to debates, there's how many times Wordsworth threw the language of the state basically back in their face, like defining who they are and things of that nature. I think that's very interesting. It's like once he felt like he had the upper hand by locking that man in the room, he got petty. And speaking of pettiness, what he decided to do, right? He threatened to take that man down with him because he had nothing to lose. I love it. The basically the SS guy, the Nazi guy, is like, look, this is after he locked him in the room. I misjudged you, you know? And the person was like, you underestimated me. Let me tell you something. A certain type of traditional person that is the hero of this piece. You know, it's something they might preach a religion and say they follow a religion, and there are tenets about turning the other cheek and shuffling off this mortal coil, you know, coming forward to carry me home and being with their deity in heaven once they leave this place. But it's not really like that. Those people have no problem taking you with them. And I think that's the misjudging here. It's like, I misjudged you. I thought you played by your religion's rules. And Mr. Wordsworth is like, yeah, whatever. I mean, if it's going to be like this, you know. And while he made the guy, the Twilight Zone Nazi take a look at his own mortality, he waited for him to acknowledge God in a very sarcastic and condescending way. And I don't think it clearly it's not supposed to be taken that way. He's supposed to be the hero. He is perishing the hero. He did perish in that horrible way. But he is definitely supposed to be the hero. And that's why I said that this episode, though its direction and its writing and its oomph has aged very well, the sentiment has not. Because when it's all, you know, especially when he says about death being the great equalizer and we're all going to have to account to God, you will still hear religious people say that. It's like, no matter, fine, you win the argument, non-believer, but when it's all said and done, you're not going to win this argument. You will not win this argument. Because the way, that's the end of my notes, the way that Serling ends the episode about what makes the state obsolete, that's the irony, that's the historical irony of the episode. Because whether our society does go totalitarian and we do persecute the religious and to the point like in the episode, right? Whether we have that or whether we have anyone in charge persecuting anyone, that's when the state becomes obsolete. So here, 60 years after this episode, 60-ish years, more than a half century after this episode airs, who is oppressing who? Right? Who is truly obsolete based on the definition that Serling gives at the end of the episode? Right? Because no matter what sentiment may or may not have aged well in this episode, we can still apply those words to see who really has the moral high ground. And thanks for joining me for this special episode of Hat in the Ring. I actually have a political channel. That's where I spend most of my time, which is why I don't upload to Hat in the Ring that often. I've come this close to making an episode on my other channel about this. I won't advertise my other channel here. I like to keep them separate. That one's a little more serious, and this one is I want it to be more fun. But man, my worlds collided today. All right, but I'll see you back on the next reaction.